Welcome back. I'm Rosie Quartz, and we're going to be talking more psychology-based shadow work. This is where we take the psychological theories and apply it to spiritual concepts. On an unrelated note, today's look is brought to us by Glitter She Wrote. And this is your daily reminder that if you cannot make serotonin yourself, store-bought is fine. As many of you already know who are watching this very small channel, because we just got here, first update, we have a background now. Yes, thank goodness, it's stars. Anybody who knows me knows I love anything to do with space. I cried when the first Mars rover shut down, literally cried. But back on focus, most of this channel so far we're talking about psychology, and hopefully just in a more grounded way than what we often see with some new age energy related theories that a lot of us have seen going around, especially on TikToks. Netflix just did a documentary on that sort of caused a big splash. But that energy we're talking about has a lot to do with a sense of exterior control over the environment related to an internal sense of anxiety and the need to manage that anxiety. Now, what that might look like is simply bad things are happening to you because you're off with the universe. If that sounds familiar, well, you may also have heard bad things are happening to you, your health is gone, your marriage is kaput, da-da-da, because you're off with God. We are also often told that we should get over it or feel a sense of guilt over the fact that we have not gotten over it. I know myself, I'm guilty of this, where I have gone through something distressing and I felt the need to vent it, to verbalize it, to help process it, and then caught myself sharing and then stopped and been like, oh, I'm so sorry, I thought I was over this, I should be over this. I want you to notice something very important about that whole concept of get over it. And this is what the most recent shadow work post prompt has been in my Patreon, is this whole get over it concept. Because what's very important to note is that when you tell someone to get over it, you've told yourself to get over it. How? Because things like trauma or distress, long-term chronic stressful events, things like that, have a literal physical impact on our bodies and our brains, that can mean that it isn't always as easy as choosing cognitively to get over it. If you have a reinforced framework in your head built there, or even within your body, something that is like a feedback between the two that is damaging your health, choosing it to get over it isn't going to help. So when you're told to get over it, that sentence actually carries no tools for you to access in order to get over it. There's no tools there. The sentence in and of itself is inherently dismissive, and it doesn't actually give you anything to work with in order to address what has happened to you or for moving forward. So as a really amazing, just terrific example of using psychological theory, mental health principles, and combining them with rituals, witchy concepts, or like pagan theory, what we're going to be looking at is actually the very first ritual within the Witch's Book of Self-Care. This was written by Erin Murphy Hiscock. One of my absolutely wonderful longtime supporters from TikTok ordered me this off of my wish list. It was so appreciated. But Erin also wrote The Green Witch. This is Magical Ways to Pamper, Soothe, and Care for Your Body and Spirit. The cover is absolutely stunning. It's also very light and travel size, so this can be stashed easily next to your bed, taken with you while traveling. Personally, I think this is a really great resource for anybody who's needing more resources, or like a great place to start with things like shadow work or your witchy path. I absolutely love how this book starts itself out as well, because it is very grounded in psychological principle. Where it starts out with, at its most basic, engaging in self-care is about self-respect. Now, the very strict religious environment that I personally grew up in had some things to say about our modern day take on self-care, and it was considered very much something you should not engage in. Self-love and self-care, it might relate to vanity, Because the whole concept is you are supposed to submit yourself, mind, body, and soul to Christ and depend on that dynamic to feed you or to care for you. Essentially, to care for yourself is an act of selfishness within that context. However, what happens when we defer our autonomy outside of ourselves in that way, we run into some very problematic areas. Within like the medical world, when psychology first became a field and you would go to the doctor for something that was happening with you, a lot of the times you could be left out of your own diagnosis. Especially if you were a woman, what might happen is your husband would take you in and you wouldn't know what was happening. It would be between the doctor and your husband or just the doctor, and you would just be put through a treatment of some kind, which is relatively horrifying to think of now. So today, often, if you are in like counseling classes in university or not, what they will emphasize is you are there to help the client help themselves. You want them to retain agency and autonomy in their life as much as possible, depending on what their situation is, because they are the expert in their experience. And there's a lot of times when our own biases and perception of what we think is best for somebody else might actually not be the case, and we can end up doing a lot of harm and damage to their lives when we step in and speak over top of them. So self-care and the tools for self-care, including like emotional intelligence and awareness, things like that, they are so important and vital to learn and to acquire for yourself, because you are the expert in your own experience. And the more you are aware of yourself, your mind, and your body, the more you have the power and agency over yourself, and there's less deferred to, well, you're off with the universe or God. So first of all, I want to walk y'all through this ritual. All credit to the author here, of course. This is not my own original idea. I actually just want to refer to this ritual specifically as an amazing example of relating a psychological theory, which I will walk you through at the end of this, to self-care. This ritual is that of releasing guilt. It is a burning ritual, and it is meant to essentially banish or release. Similar to a cord cutting ritual, this is something that a lot of people may find helpful if they are working through processing some very heavy emotions or memories. As always, this is not therapy. Shadow work is not a substitute for therapy. It is simply a therapeutic tool. Always speak to a licensed, registered professional. The basic witchy, spiritual, pagan skills you're going to want to need for this ritual are that of very, very simple ones: grounding and centering. If you're more on the Wiccan side of things, or it resonates with you, you can also cast a circle as you do this ritual. For those of us who grew up in a strict religious environment, this ritual may also be incredibly beneficial, because if you grew up in that environment, chances are you had behavior modification used on you. Behavior modification may include punishments or rewards in order to train or manipulate your behavior and ultimately your perception of even reality itself. It's intended to train you to be a certain way. And for many of us, as we deconstructed that religion, we had to come right up against that training, which was intended to evoke the negative response in our brain. It was supposed to punish us as we started to deviate, so to speak, or rebel, or whatever they wanted to call us. But as we deconstructed, we may have hit that sense of, oh shoot, I'm not supposed to be doing this, and you start getting that inherent guilt response that was put there in your brain. So first of all, for this ritual, you're going to put yourself in your sacred space, cast your circle, maybe sit by your altar. This can, as long as this is done in an area, because you're going to have a candle for this, as long as this is done in an area that feels relatively safe to you and you're not close to any fire hazards, you're good. For this ritual specifically, they call for frankincense incense. However, I would say that you could also substitute something else to you that, whatever scent, aromatherapy kind of signifies release to you, something that feels healing, even something that helps you, like you smell it, and it just brings you to that place of feeling like you can release an emotion. And what you're also going to have is a white candle. And so at the same time, you're going to light the frankincense and you're going to light the candle. After you've done so, you're going to sit in a place and your attention is going to go towards guilt. This could be in terms of relationship, your path. This could be in terms of career, but something where you may automatically like shy away from it. It doesn't necessarily feel good, but this is supposed to be a safe place where you can look at it. And you're going to ask yourself, what triggers this guilt for me? How do I experience it? Do I try to internally avoid it? Does it hit me physically? Do I tense up? How do I experience this guilt? Now you're also going to have a heat-proof container of some kind. This could be a cauldron, something of that nature, whatever it is that you can safely burn paper within. Because when you're ready, what you're going to do is write all of this down on a piece of paper, at least the relevant parts to you. It can be the people, it can be the triggers, it could be how you react to it. Once you're done writing it down on the piece of paper, what you're going to do is fold the piece of paper up to whatever feels right to you. They say in here in half or in quarters. And then what the author gives us to say as we release the paper into the fire, essentially like you set it on fire, you put it in your fireproof, your cauldron or container, the author gave a short little release paragraph to say. And it starts out with, I release this guilt to the universe and I invite peace and serenity to take its place. Open my heart to the positive energy of this lesson and support me as I learn to care for myself freely. Thank you for your many blessings. And once again, all credit to that goes to the author, Erin Murphy Hiscock. What we also need to look at here is once it is burned out, you're going to take the ashes and dispose of them in a safe place. Remember, things like salt, certain chemicals, do not dispose of those outside because they can damage the environment. So once again, how does this relate back to psychological theory? Well, once again, first of all, we're going to look back at the behavioral reinforcement, why we might even feel this guilt in the first place, because we also need to recognize that a guilt response isn't necessarily a natural one. It can be something that we were socialized to perceive as being something we should be feeling. Not necessarily that we have to feel it. It may simply be that we were trained or raised to perceive that, and then that training, that socialization kicks in when we start to go in a different direction. Another great resource we're going to be looking at is Healing the Trauma of Domestic Violence, a workbook for women. There's a lot of great techniques in here, including for managing stress through muscle release, a lot of great exercises, things like that. However, this is based on the DSM-4. It's a little bit dated in that regard. It's also very much more on like the cognitive side of things. I've got some like personal like comments on this. However, there is still some good techniques that you can pull out of this. So we're going to be looking at the section here on guilt. That chapter is everything you ever wanted to know about guilt but were afraid to ask. Essentially, guilt can be defined as an unpleasant feeling with an accompanying belief that one should have thought, felt, or acted differently. And guilt can happen in one of two ways. Guilt can be what we think of as bad or unpleasant feelings, but also, and back to quoting the book, it can also involve a set of beliefs, cognitions, interpretations, or negative value judgments about yourself. The next set of exercises on my Patreon are going to go into the 4 typical guilt responses as listed in this book. Be sure to sign up there on my Patreon if you would like to have access to those. We're also going to be starting Zoom sessions once a month, in which kind of like a support group or something like just we can sit down and talk. If you have further questions or you'd like to talk to me directly, that will be available as well. Unfortunately, in many circumstances, a lot of people feel a sense of guilt over things that they were trained or socialized to believe they should feel guilty for. but it's not actually necessary, and it's causing harm to them, to their mental and physical health. So this shadow work ritual we looked at earlier with the Witch's Book of Self-Care is an example of something you can do once you have acknowledged that you're having a guilt process that is hindering you rather than helping you. Because we often perceive guilt as being that thing that keeps us on track, but that's not necessarily true, because guilt can be based on belief systems, ideology, and that, as we said before, if that comes from someone who's not the expert in your experience, well, essentially what's going to happen is you're having a guilt response for something that you don't even need to. So if in your shadow work you come up against something like this, that is one example of something you can do to essentially tell your brain, we're letting this go. This is a very concrete, physical, this is not mine to carry, and we're going to continue to move forward rather than holding that guilt, that socialized internal guilt, in our shadow self. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. Of course, we're going to have more content down the road. I finally have my filming space a little bit more back to myself, which I'm super happy about. I'm really excited to be making more content for you guys. Please let me know if you have questions. That's what the comment section is for. You can of course find me on TikTok and Instagram. The spicier stuff ends up on OF. With the Instagram use of the Reels now, I'll probably be doing an example of the ritual that I just went over with you now. And of course, as always, a big shout out / thank you to the people who support my content, who send me just things like the background, the resources, so that I can keep doing what I love to do. I'm a broke-ass peasant. Tough times out here. Anything you guys have done for me just blows me away. It means the entire world. So please keep letting me know what I can do to give back to you as well. And I wish you a great rest of your week.